Diablo Like game series, creating a game like Diablo 2 from uh, from start to finish. And this is part 10, and it's spells 1.3. And we've already made a couple of spells here for our occult blood witch, the vortex, and the abyssal bolt. And this time we're going to be discussing how to make the bloodstone spell, which is going to turn the enemies to stone for a short time. All right. But before we get into that, I want to show you. Um, there's a couple of health potions down here. Before I started filming, I farmed these guys for a couple of health potions. And we're going to use the bloodstone to turn them to stone while I go grab them so they don't bother me. So I selected it from the button, which simply tells the player's script which spell to cast as far as through an int number, and I believe it's int 3, but we're going to right click right near them and set it off. Boom, now they're stone. So I'm going to go over here. They're not going to bother me. They're stone. And I'm going to grab that health potion and that health potion, and I'll come back. Now, if you've been following along, you might have noticed that they didn't play that potion bubbling sound when I grabbed them, because up until now they've been playing that potion bubbling sound for me to use them. And so clearly she didn't use them. So where'd they go? Well, I just want to show you something that's coming in the future, and that's I'm working on the inventory already, and it's not done. I just started it, but yeah, these are the two potions I just picked up, and so far you can grab them and move them around, and they'll snap to the slot you put them there, and it even gives you a debug of what slot they're in. Let's say I want this one up here, I can boop, and it snaps to that slot. So they can be dragged around to any slot you want. And if I click them, then I use them. So now you hear the sound, I used it, and it's gone. So that's the inventory so far, and it will be coming in the future. And I just wanted you to see that before we go into the Bloodstone, to see what's coming in your future, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, I got the inventory started. And before we get into the code on the spell, I want to say thank you to the recent subscribers and all the subscribers. You guys rock. And just take a minute right now to hit the like button, please. Go click that button and show your support for this channel and its content for free by liking the video. All right, now let's get into the Bloodstone spell. Let's see it one more time. We'll get them chasing after us a little bit, and boom. Okay, now as you can see, it stops them dead in their tracks. Okay, they're in the middle. This guy's in the middle of his run animation with his foot out. This guy's got his foot kind of back, and this guy, and they just got stopped dead in their tracks. It froze their animation in place, and it turned them to stone. And you can see the texture very much looks like they're stone. A little stone statue right now. And I did that by just taking their base texture, and I brought it into the paint program, and I use GIMP for this, and I desaturated it, basically colorized it, and gave it some effects like bump mapping stuff to make it look like stone. So that's how I made the texture. And yeah, let's get into the code for that, shall we? All right. So first off, there's an effect, a sort of nova effect that goes off from where you click, and it's got a little bit of a particle effect with it too, and that's a prefab, and that's called Stone Smoke, and I'm going to bring it out here. Okay, and if we play the particle effect, that's just kind of like smoky kind of stone dust that goes off in the center real quick. And this piece here is a plane that I attached material to with this ring image on it. And this ring, I gave an animation in the animations tab down here. And it simply goes from 0 to 4 in its scale real quick. And yeah, it starts off at 0 and goes boop, you know, and then stops. And that's the effect. And I set it off wherever you right click to set the spell off. All right. And in the code, let's go check out the player code here. Click the move we've been using. And eventually, pretty soon, as soon as we get done with her, the Blood Witch, we'll probably start turning this code into different player codes for each of the 6 characters. But for now, it's working. So what's new up top is we have the public game object smoke cloud, which creates the spot in the inspector to drag the effect into, and you put whatever effect you want, for it. But that's how I did mine. And then we got a new vector 3 called temp position, and I'm using that to do the overlap sphere check wherever you click. And for this spell, that should be all that's new right there. So we go down into the update where we check for the right mouse button if it's down and clicked. And now we have a new spell type called spell 3. Well, they're all spell type, but this one is number 3. It's an int. And it checks to see if you have enough mana to cast a spell. Does array call ray and equals it to camera.main screen point to ray. And takes in the input mouse position from wherever the right mouse clicked. Then it does its physics ray cast, ray out hit, math F infinity, and checks for the ground only. And then we use that temp position we created to equal the hit point of the ray. And then we set the temp position Y plus 0.2, just above the ground. Then we create a variable called temp and instantiate smoke cloud, which is the effect I showed you, at the temp position and the quaternion identity. And then we destroy that effect, which we refer to as temp, after 4 seconds. And then we play a sound, the frozen stone sound, which again, we just up top, it's just an audio clip. And I put it in public so I could drag that sound into the inspector. And then after we play the sound, and we're playing it at volume of 20, we run this bloodstone function, and then we decrease the mana, so we take away the cost. So the bloodstone function is right down here at the bottom, and it's a one-time shot array for a physics overlap sphere called enemies that gets the temp position of where we clicked, gives it a radius of 10, and checks only for enemies. So it checks the enemy layers, which is only the enemy. And then it does a for each loop after it does the overlap sphere check, and it checks for colliders by saying collider, enemy collider in enemies. So any enemy with a collider that's within the overlap sphere radius, for each one it finds, it gets the component of enemy AI, which is the enemy script we've been using, and says enemy dot start stone. And that is it for the player's side of it. And then we go to the enemy. Okay. And let's see what's new up here. Now, in the enemy, we have this public float called stone duration. And you see it's set to 10, but in the inspector, I've got it set to 60, I think. And the inspector overrides this. So that's just how long they stay turned to stone. Then we've got a slot for the public material definition here. called stone material, which I told you about. And that's just where I drag the material in to switch it to on the enemy. And then we've got two new bools, private, called stoned and unstoned. And they're both set to false by default. And then down in the update, we've got if being sucked equals false and stoned equals false. Before we had just if being sucked equals false. And we were doing that so that when they were getting sucked into the vortex, they could not run the rest of their update function code. And now we've added and stoned. So if either one of these equals true, if you've been turned to stone or are being sucked into a vortex, you do not run any of your code. All right. And then that if statement says else, if there was a black hole and it's not there anymore and you survived, then it sets you back to your normal state, and that was there before. But now we've got if unstoned equals true, we also set you back to your normal state. All right. And down in the bottom, yeah. So this function here, public void start stone, is what we called from the player's code after we set off the effect and did the overlap sphere check. All right, so this function, we get the bool stoned and set it to true. And this stops them, like I just showed you, from running the rest of their update function code. Then we get their agent and we say is stopped is true, and we disable it by saying enabled equals false. And then we start this coroutine called freeze enemy. And that's right here. So this coroutine, an I enumerator called freeze enemy, we get the animator component of the enemy, which is what it is here that we're on, the enemy AI. We get the animator, and we enable it to false. And doing it this way, it freezes their animation in its tracks. Whatever animation they were on and whatever frame of that animation freezes it in its tracks, which I showed you. And that's what does that. Just setting the animator to enabled equals false. And then we get a skinned mesh renderer array, and we're doing this because on that particular model, there's two different materials, each using its own skinned mesh renderer. So we use an array and call it renderers and get the component in children because they're below the main game object with the code on it. And I'll show you that real quick if you want. We'll just open up the goblin. Let's grab a goblin. And this main goblin thing here is the one that has the code on it, but down below we've got goblin eyes and goblin, and they each have a skinned mesh renderer. Okay, so that's why we're getting the children of this object in its code. It's because the mesh renderers are on these two objects. Right. So we get those mesh renderers and put them in an array. Then we create another material array, and we call it original mats. And we do this so we can get a reference to whatever the original materials are before we turn them to stone. So we set it equal to a new material and renderers.length, so it grabs them both. And this for loop, again, runs through the renderers uh, array and gets all that are in there, which is 2. And then it sets original materials I equal to renderers I dot material. And then it gets renderers.I material equals stone material. Okay. So it gets these materials and stores them in this array, each with a, variable of I. And then it turns it to stone. And this way, when they're not stone anymore, we do a yield return new, wait for seconds in the stone duration. After they're done, after this is done, they're not stone anymore. So we do another for loop, check the renderer's length, and if the renderers don't equal null, like say they died or whatever, if renderer's I does not equal null, renderer's I dot material equals original materials. And so it goes through both of them because it's a for loop, and it sets them back to the original materials they had before we turned them to stone. Then we set their animator enabled back to true, and we set that bool unstoned to true, and we play another stone sound right there. So what's happening here is this if statement that checks to see if they can run the rest of their update functions has that stoned, and it was set to true when we cast the spell. So in the else statement on unstoned, we set stone to false. So now it can run its update code again, and we reset it. That's the unstoned one. If unstoned equals true, we set stoned back to false. So now this stoned is false again, and they can run its update stuff. And as soon as it does, we set unstoned to false again. So we're kind of resetting it for the next time they get turned to stone. And and that's basically all there is to that. So so yeah, if you want, we can go check that out again. All right, and I've actually started some images too for icons for the spells and stuff, so these placeholder buttons won't be here much longer either. But we'll take the bloodstone and just set it off right in front of this guy. Boom! Now there's stone. So stoned has been set to true in that if statement. They're not running their update functions anymore. We changed their material to the stoned material and gotten a reference to the material they had before. And when their time runs out of being stone, they will change their materials back to whatever they had. And yeah, and again, the inventory is started. And as you can see, I've got it at least working for health potions, so that's good. And I've assigned the panel in and out with this button. And all I do with this is I'm moving it off screen because you can't really set it inactive or you can't use it. So I just move it off screen, and it can still store things like the health potions and stuff. So that inventory will be coming eventually here, and I just wanted to show you it started so that you have faith that it will have an inventory like Diablo 2. We're trying to make this as much like Diablo 2 as possible without exactly copying it, because again, I don't want to get sued. So yeah, we will have an inventory, and now we've got 3 spells on her, and that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got something out of it. Hope you hit the like button, and until next time, peace out.